What fact is common knowledge in your field, but almost unknown to the rest of the population? Urban heat kills way more people in Australia than bushfires. In the 2009 Black Saturday bushfires in Victoria, 173 people died in the fires, but over 300 died of the heat prior to that. Also, most of those deaths occur at night, not during the day. Why do they occur at night? Thermal shock? Not OP, but I believe it's because if it's still warm at night, the body doesn't have the chance to cool down and still in constant stress/overworked from being overheated. Also, fans don't actually cool you down adequately to prevent heat stress/exhaustion. Basically this. The extended exposure to heat due to the urban heat island effect. So how can I prevent heat exhaustion in these, unfortunately, increasingly frequent situations? Fans do work, provided you are hydrating well and taking measures to avoid exposure. What I think they were saying is that once you are at the point that your body is failing to sweat enough to shed the heat, fans aren't going to do much. What can be done depends on the type of heat you are experiencing. If the wet bulb temp is 110, you are going to need to get underground most likely. Assuming you can't just go to the hospital/get in a climate-controlled environment obviously. Your calf muscles act as a pump for your lymph fluid, which is basically the garbage pickup and immunity DoorDash of your body. Without flexing your calf, the fluid has no way of moving against gravity. Each time we walk, the muscles contract, squeezing the fluid back up towards the core for processing. That's why sitting for long periods causes swelling in the legs. LPT, sitting for long periods? Move your ankles up and down to pump the calf. Pump up the calves, pump it up, while your lymph is flowing. UTIs will often cause confusion in people over 70. UTI is urinary tract infection, and some people can get confused to the point of hallucinations and delirium. It can cause increased weakness, which also leads to falls. I work in the mental health field. Often I'm told a loved one has dementia, Alzheimer's, etc. I will ask about symptom onset and they'll say a couple days or something similar. A round of antibiotics later and the loved one is usually back to their baseline. UTIs in older folks are wild. Why does the UTI cause those symptoms? It causes their brain to be flooded with electrolytes and metabolic waste that the kidneys should be removing. Also fever. An elevator will go up to the top of the hoist instead of crash to the floor in most catastrophic failures due to the counterweights. And if it breaks, they don't come get you through a hatch in the roof like in the movies. They just go to the machine room, hand hoist it to the next door, open with a special key and get you out. There's also controls on the outside of the lift at the top, so when working on it you can ride it up or down while sitting on top. Had to do it a few times, scary at first but after a while super fun. Edit, so it seems US elevators have hatches. UK, where I am, do not have hatches in our lifts. That hatch in the ceiling is for kidnappings, assassinations or high-end diamond heists. Let me just say that I appreciate the heck out of your distinction between the different tiers of diamonds heists. Counterweights are typically sized to balance a cab that's half loaded, so if you're in an elevator that's rated 2,000 pounds and you have 900 to 1,000 pounds of weight in the cab, you might not go anywhere. My elevator is rated for 2,000 pounds, and sometimes when I'm riding it I try to imagine how in the world you would get that much weight into it. You could only fit like two 600-pound people in at once before you ran out of space, and that's only 1,200 total. The answer is probably building supplies, as a lot of buildings, at least where I am, don't necessarily have dedicated freight elevators. Things like glass and tile can pack the weight it to a fairly small area. I'm jealous. When I had to go into office buildings regularly, I got yelled at so many times for not using the freight, and a lot of them were in horrible condition and in very inconvenient locations. You're so heavy they send you to the freight elevators? I kid, I kid. I'm sure the passenger elevators, while not designed for freight, are engineered to do the kind of stuff most people would load in there anyway, for safety factor's sake. Like, I wouldn't load it with 8,000 pounds of steel, but it's accounting for the fact office dummies may decide to haul an entire pallet of 5-gallon drinking water jugs in it. Hell, I wouldn't be terribly surprised if someone told me that many freight elevators are basically the same as the passenger ones, just built near loading doors and with those padded blankets fastened to the walls. Nah, I did commercial paper shredding. They didn't want me dragging my big-ass trash can on wheels through the lobby or scraping up the elevator walls. Totally understandable, it just made my job more difficult than it was at buildings where they let me walk through the front door. Some of it was, like I said, freight elevators were in bad condition and didn't get maintenance like the lobby ones did, some were hard to use or I wasn't allowed to operate so I had to wait for maintenance. Some were in very difficult alleys that I had a hard time maneuvering my truck through, some had dumb security protocols where I had to go through a back door, come to the front desk to sign in and then return to the back to use the elevator. I had more than one where I had to drag a 95-gallon bin up a flight of stairs because shred trucks side load to ground level and loading docks are designed for semi-trucks to back up to. I had a few where the freight elevator was in the lobby next to, and identical to, the other elevators but I was required to stand there and wait for the one freight while 3 other elevators sat and used. I could go on. Powerful explosives are so insensitive to shock that it usually takes a smaller, more sensitive explosive to set them off. C4 will just burn if put into a fire, soldiers used it to cook food in Vietnam. Pure C4 also gets you high if you eat it. They started adding a compound into it that makes you violently sick to stop people from doing that. You have to admire the human compulsion to get wrecked. Right, imagine thinking I am bored, let me eat a bomb to see what happens and then getting wrecked. In WW2, torpedoes burned ethanol as fuel. Good old 190 proof pure ethanol. Young men being young men, you can guess why those torpedoes often wound up with less than a full load of fuel. They put an agent in the fuel to make it taste bad, but if you strained it through a loaf of bread it would filter it to a certain degree and make it more potable. Never underestimate the power of alcoholism combined with boredom. When you're taking Imodium, you're actually taking an opioid. But it's designed to only interact with the opioid receptors in your digestive tract to slow down your intestines. Scientists were like, hey, you know that anti-diarrhea medication heroin? Well, what if we made a version of that without the pesky side effects of getting you high? This explains all those commercials from like 5 to 10 years ago for drugs that helped with constipation from being on opioids. Exactly. Those drugs like methylnaltrexone block the opioid receptors in the gut but not in the brain. So basically the exact opposite of Imodium. I took Imodium one time in my life. It was a day my stomach was off and I was spending the day/weekend snowboarding. The Imodium basically made me too tired and groggy to snowboard and I laid down in the car the whole time. Not worth it. This could also be an electrolyte imbalance from the upset stomach. When a person flatlines, you cannot shock them out of it. Paramedic here. Flatline is just a regular person term for asystole. Asystole means that the heart is not beating at all. You don't shock asystole. Shocking someone only happens when someone's heart is quivering erratically or beating so fast that it's not effective. This is called either ventricular fibrillation or ventricular tachycardia. The goal of shocking someone when their heart is in one of these two conditions is to either restart the heart into its regular rhythm or to knock it into asystole. When they are in asystole, the goal is to keep oxygenated blood moving to the body via CPR and to try to get the heart to start beating on its own again. The heart is a muscle, but it has its own internal/intrinsic ability to beat without any input from the brain, automatically. The goal is to get that to happen again. That happens through high-quality CPR and oxygen as well as drugs. TLDR, medical TV shows suck. You don't shock flat line, you actually shock what shows up as squiggly lines, sort of medically speaking. Public service, CPR early, hard and fast is the best thing you can do for someone who is in cardiac arrest. As well as getting an AED to make sure they are not in any of the squiggly lines. Fun fact, even at the hospital, the best thing they can do for you is give you adequate oxygen and do really good CPR, scientifically proven. People, users, are the weakest link in most technology systems. 99% of the time. Truth. I fix checkpoint security equipment and explosive detection systems for a living. Fixing the machine that they broke is the job, but showing them what they did to it, why it happened, and what to do in the future is what makes it possible for me to maintain great uptime on as many systems as I do. Don't put your password on a post-it on your monitor is a good start. Of course it is, then I won't have to remember it. It is much better usability. Genetics, there's a bunch of stuff we don't report back because they're considered incidental findings. This can include genetic diseases with no treatment/mitigation. Or non-paternity. If your kid is sick with a genetic disease and you go get genetic testing done for mom, dad and little Timmy, we do not automatically report back if dad is no relation or is actually an uncle. At the same time, in most places you have the right to request your data. Oh wow, how often does dad isn't dad happen? There's a very respectable paper claiming that it's only like 2% of the time because some could be sample mix-ups etc. But the rule of thumb when doing a study with trios, mother, father, child, where there's a genetic condition is to expect you'll need to discard about 6 to 8% of your families. And while sample mix-ups do happen, you basically never see cases where the sample marked as the mother turns out to be unrelated. Bed bugs don't make you a nasty person with a nasty home. An infestation isn't due to a sanitation issue. They're an imported pest, which means they hitched a ride on something you brought into the house. Usually luggage or furniture. Not sure if it's true, but I heard they're more common in expensive hotels than cheap ones because there are more international travelers. They're certainly more common in expensive hotels than they used to be. More travel equals more bed bugs. Fun tidbit, when management finds out about a bedbug infestation at extended stay hotels, they'll have the extended stay customers in affected rooms clear out their stuff and leave for a day or so while the room is treated. But the customer's stuff isn't treated, so when they come back they just reinfest the room. Not a good situation. Regular, short stay, customers just get moved to a different room. It's good practice to always check your hotel room for bed bugs when you first go into your room. Please like and subscribe for more daily content.